What's going on, guys? In this tutorial we're going to set up a basic navigation bar up here, learn about CSS, and add an external CSS file to our page, and let's get it going. What's happening, guys? In this tutorial we're going to learn about the CSS, adding it into a different file itself. We're going to learn a little bit more about some HTML elements that will help us stylize our page and keep things organized as well. We're going to create a navigation bar for our website that we're creating here. So what we're going to do is within our body tag we're going to create a whole new section for all of our header information, and eventually this will be the same for every page that we have, whether that be a login or go to the home page, just a simple navigation. A new HTML element called header. And within our header, as for now, we're just going to have a nav. This is going to be our actual navigation bar. And basically all a navigation bar is an unordered list. So we already know how to create that. It's a UL for unordered lists, and we're going to create some list items. And what should be our first list item? Maybe home, something simple. I'm sorry, I kind of have a cold here, so I apologize if I don't sound the greatest, but I'm trying to make as many tutorials as I can. Hopefully it's not too bad. So after we create, like, for example, a home page, maybe we have an about us page, a contact page that will have a form or something along those lines. Something simple as for now. So if we save this, go back to our page and reload it, it's not going to look the greatest. So there's bulletin points. We might want to get rid of that, definitely. And we also want to stylize it up and make it look a little bit nicer for our user experience. Even though it blends in with how nicely we've designed our web page so far, we're actually going to stylize it up here. So let's jump back into NetBeans, and we could add style within this style tags here, but we actually want to keep things more organized in this. You guys have learned the two other ways of stylizing besides an external file. This is called internal stylizing, and you can also do inline stylizing, where we'd actually go into the image and type the style attribute here. So those are the three ways to get CSS loaded onto your page. We're going to learn about adding an external resource. So within our source folder, we already have a way to organize our images. We're going to just create a new file system or new folder to hold all of our CSS. I'm just going to call it CSS and create a new CSS file. Or actually, we could do SAS. We'll get into SAS unless eventually I kind of want to start from the beginning of just a CSS file, and we're just going to have it index.html here, and go ahead and whoops. And actually, this is just supposed to be index.css. I don't know what I was thinking, so rename that. Alright, so now that we have our new CSS file, let's rip this stuff out and add the CSS we had previously. So if we go back to the index.html page, we're just going to grab what we have so far, cut that, and paste it within our CSS file. Maybe clean up the structure a little bit. So now we have something nice and clean, so we can save that and go back to our HTML page, and we need a way for this page to load up that CSS file. So again, within our head section is where we load all of our resources. Generally, with JavaScript, we'll load those at the bottom. But I'll get into that when we start learning JavaScript. But as for CSS, you want to load those within our header section, and all it's going to be is a link to where that resource is located. So it's going to be a link attribute, and it's going to say what type is this, what are we looking at, and it's going to be a style sheet, and it's going to be a style sheet reference, and it's going to be of the type CSS, and you just type out text/CSS. And then it'll know it's a CSS file. And lastly, we have to give it reference of where this file actually is located. So it's going to be within our CSS file, and then just index.css. So hopefully, if we save this and reload our page, everything should be the exact same as it previously was with our table. So that looks good. We have all of our resources set up that we need. Everything's working, it looks like. So now let's go into our CSS file and actually spruce up this navigation a little bit, because right now it's pretty ugly. There aren't even links. We should probably change that. Let's change that first. These are going to be all links, so a href /home. Obviously we don't have this page yet. So there we go. That should make our navigation have links. So now let's actually work on stylizing this. A lot of times when you're working with stylizing, you kind of want to just see what a page will look like quickly, instead of having to write it in your CSS file and then reload the page, see if it looks good, change it, and then do that same process over and over. So if you guys are using Chrome, you can just right click and go to inspect element. This will allow us to add some CSS for these elements here. So right now we're just selecting that bottom link, and whatever we type in here is only going to affect that one reference there. So what we actually want to do is, instead of just stylizing this one element, we're going to actually reference all list items here. This is how CSS works. It defines, again, what you're stylizing, and eventually we can get even more and more specific with, if, for example, we wanted to stylize only one item. And it looks like if we don't actually reference it within our CSS file, we won't be able to modify the original list items. So let's go back to our project real quickly and define the style that we want to have for all of our list items. So we're just going to set up something li for list items. What do we want this to have? Well, we want the text to be in the center. There's something called text align, and we're just going to say center. Again, a lot of the CSS will be stuff that you have to remember, and it will become second nature once you start developing. It's really, I mean, you can take notes if you want, but it's something you'll pick up quickly as you use it more often. So don't be like, oh, I have to remember everything exactly perfectly. So as you can see now, it looks like our text is in the center. If we if we inspect these elements, we can mess around now with all list items on our page. And as you can see, for now, it has affected all of our other lists as well. So that's something that we want to take into consideration, that even though we're just messing with the navigation, it's going to affect other things within our whole page as well. Any other list item is going to be affected by the CSS. What we want to learn about is how to specifically just reference list items within the navigation up here. So again, if we go back to NetBeans and we look at our navigation, you can see that within this nav tag, so that's where the list items that we actually want to change are. They're within this nav property. So how we can do that is we can reference these specific items again within our CSS file by first referencing the nav element, and then doing a space and saying, hey, somewhere within this nav element, there's going to be some list items, and those are the ones that I want you to apply this style to, not all list items. So it's kind of nesting it in. As you can see up here, when we did the comma TD, that's saying both of these elements are the same, style of them the same. Here we don't have a comma, it's just saying, hey, it looks like there's some list items within something called nav. So if we save this, go back to our page and refresh it, you can see that these list items are no longer affected, but we still have the same sense of style that we wanted up here. So that's the basic structure of setting up CSS. So for the rest of this tutorial, we're just going to kind of spruce this up and kind of mess around with some different things. So again, we're referencing our nav list items here, and we're just going to start doing different things. So one thing that we want to do is actually have each of these have their own amount of space. So as for now, we'll have 3 elements, so let's give them all 30% of the screen, or 33.3% of the screen, and we can do that by setting a width attribute. So we're just going to say width is 33.3, and as you can see, that's probably about the width that we have here. You can't really see the, maybe you can. Yeah, so you can see the blue area, that's about 1/3 of the screen. The next thing that we want to do is actually have these be side by side, and you can do that with something called float. Float will allow you to float an attribute either to the left of the screen or to the right of the screen. So we're going to actually float everything left. So that actually looks pretty good for a page right now. So let's go over and save this within our actual CSS file. And another thing that we're going to do is unstylize our navigation. So if you click on this unordered list, unstylize our unordered list. So within our unordered list, again, we're just affecting that property or that element right now, and we can just say there's something called list style, and we're just going to say none for this. You can check out some other styles if you're actually using, and we're just going to say none for this, and that's going to take away the defaults for having those bulletin points. So those are pretty much the changes we're going to make as of now on our page. So again, we have a width of 33.3% of what is available, and we're also floating left. Pretty simple. The other thing that we want to do is change that nav, or actually that list. It's actually going to be the unordered list within our nav. We're going to change that to have a list style of none. And there we go. We should have all of our changes set up so far. Alright, so I know it's not much, guys, but I'm probably going to cut this tutorial short because I think it's getting kind of long. But we have learned how to set up an external CSS file, started stylizing our navigation bar. We're going to finish that up in the next tutorial or so. And we've also learned how to stylize certain elements. Again, elements within just our navigation instead of our whole page. So we've actually learned quite a bit in this tutorial. Again, knowing all these things, like you'd be like, well, how would I know that list style is a thing? Don't worry about that, guys, as of now. Again, once we start using these more, they're just going to become second nature, or just a quick Google search will help you find what you need to find. So don't worry too much about that, as long as you understand the core concepts of, hey, how do I get these list items and not those ones? That's kind of what I wanted to teach in this tutorial. Guys, again, thanks for watching. Hope you subscribe, hope you like the videos, and have a great rest of your day.